We're live on Instagram. We are live on YouTube. I think Keith said he missed us. I think I'm even going to go live on Ghostface too. We'll just go like triple threat live. Let's do it. Let's just go all in on lives on every platform possible. So the whole discussion today is going to be about training biceps. And do you actually need bigger biceps as an athlete? Do you actually need bigger biceps as an athlete? And are there even athletes that have big biceps that we know of? I'm going to actually try to move this a hair. Let's go like this right here. I got my personal Instagram live. I've got, Yaime's on there. Erica, what's up? All right, so if we need big biceps, let's get into it. But first, we're going to go over, if you guys are on YouTube, which is the camera I am speaking towards, the big factor is, did you win those free shirts? Before we get into the biceps training. And so email us at support@garagestrength.com if you won the giveaway, and we're going to tell you who that is shortly here, and it's up on the screen on YouTube. So you can email us support@garagestrength.com that you won the t-shirt giveaway. You got to take a picture of your YouTube studio. You send that in, and then we can make sure that it's actually you, and we'll mail you that free swole shirt. So looking at the winners, Dr. H.J. Hulse Boss. Dr. H.J. Hulse Boss. On the Plyos video, you won that free t-shirt. By the way, that Plyos video is sick. It's like 10 different plyometrics that you can use to become a freak athlete. We also have, as based off today's topic, the biceps video recently came out, early last week, I think. Second winner from try these 4 tricks to increase chest size. This is going to be Osman Muhammad 7967. Osman Muhammad 7967. Make sure both of you guys email us. You're up on the chat, up on the YouTube image. I want a shirt that says small. One of your sub is from that flag you got on. What shirt was I wearing that day? What shirt did I have on for my chest video? I don't remember either. All right, so you guys know what you have to do. Now, let's get into some of these big topics before we dive into the discussion around biceps. First discussion we're going to see here is going to be parachutes for speed training. What about a parachute? So what are my thoughts on parachute training? And I think that that there's a couple big factors. I think a lot of people will do parachute training almost for like the allure of like speed training, like, oh, we're doing speed training, we got parachutes. I think the big problem with it is that wind is a big issue. The age of the athlete, I really don't think that it's valuable really at all, especially with most athletes. It's like, if we can work on strength and work on plyometric work on technique, work on actually sprinting, do speed work with sleds, and then you bring in something like hills, I think you're going to get a much bigger response than actually training with a parachute. So I think that parachute training is really, in my opinion, pretty freaking pointless, just because there's a lot of other, and then you start to add in like a 1080 motion or the what is the other one, the rocket, I can't remember the other one's name, but it's basically like, dude, there's so many ways to actually improve this stuff that's going to lead to better overall sprint speed and sprint mechanics, that, and 9 times out of 10, if we're looking at how to improve speed, the parachute doesn't even like cross my mind once. So I think the big one there is you look at sled work, you look at strength, you look at plyometric work, you look at sprint mechanics and drills, you work at hill sprints. And if you're also just improving calisthenics, right? You're trying to improve the way you manipulate your body when you're training. You try to improve, and that's where we're coming up with the discussion around plyometrics, right? A lot of plyometrics, and I think a lot of people will say, I want to improve calisthenics, but they're not thinking about plyometrics are just a ballistic version of that. And so that plays a huge role in speed development and locomotion. And so we've got to be aware of that as we're developing athletes. So that is the first question. The next big one, this is going to be a question around my Lyme disease, actually, I think. So somebody actually commented, hey, man, I'm sure I skipped a year or two in videos, but whatever happened to your Lyme disease stuff? Did you completely obliterate it, or have you just changed lifestyle accordingly? So if you go way back on my YouTube from, I want to say like 2013, 2014, you'll see I had struggled pretty tremendously with Lyme disease. And Lyme disease is an infection. It's a bacterial infection that can essentially like leach into your joints. It can cause like massive headaches. It can cause a big immuno breakdown, like a immunosuppression. And I had gotten this, I want to say probably 2012, and I dealt with it for about 2.5 years, where it was just like this huge problem. I would have raging headaches. I wouldn't be able to like focus at all. I would be tired all the time. And I ended up going in to get blood work done. And when I got blood work done, all these hormones were out of whack, so much so that they actually thought I had lupus. They thought I had leukemia. My white blood cell count was up over 20. So it was an issue that I had to deal with. I was on high dose antibiotics for over 2 years. I was on a drug called Mepron 4 different times. I was on low dose naltrexone. I took minocycline, doxycycline, azithromycin was what I was on the entire time. I would get shots of Rocephin. I would get B12 shots. I'm trying to think. There was another drug that I would get for the Rocephin as well. Rocephin's another antibiotic injection. I'm trying to think through all of that stuff. And it took like over a year for my white blood cell count to come down and for things to start being normal. And so now I was getting blood work done every 2 weeks for the first year. And then it just took a long time for me to get into this point of feeling decent. I tried to exercise as much as possible. And I think one of the big factors was at that time I was extremely heavy too. I was like 300 pounds. And I also sort of think like the antibiotics might have played a role in that, because they do help improve body mass, meaning you get fat when you're on antibiotics. But yeah, it took me a long time. And I would say with the Lyme disease specifically, I still have like these floaters that I never had in my vision. So I have a lot of floaters like in my eyesight that I never had until I got Lyme. And that was like one of the first things I noticed when I started to have these symptoms. The biggest thing was like, I was never a headache person. I never would get headaches ever. And the biggest symptom was that I remember for a long period thinking like my head was about to explode. Like and my wife's like, you have a headache, but my headache didn't go away. And then I started getting anxiety really bad. And it was just like this snowball effect. And I'd get dizzy and vertigo and stuff like that. So now, it's been almost a decade. Yeah, it's been over a decade since I've been diagnosed, and I've had like some issues here and there, but nothing outside of, if you watch the video we posted yesterday, you could see my right elbow here, like it doesn't really lock out, right? And I think a lot of that is related to the Lyme disease and the arthritis in my right elbow. So I've been on more drugs than you could ever imagine if you just look up low dose naltrexone, look up the Mepron, look up doxycycline, minocycline, Rocephin. I was on everything. Acyclovir. There are like 3 different viral ones that I was on, because I did test positive as well for Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So, anyway, that was that. That was that. I would say, for me, it was like changing the lifestyle, trying to lose weight, taking it slowly, and like making sure, like with the Lyme disease, like, because then you also just start to spiral down. Yeah. Anyway, we just got a question. I'm going to get into the biceps stuff now. Just got a question. How many times a week do you do plyometrics? In a week, I would say once. Try to do it twice if you can, but start with once. Okay, so George Scott comes in. George Scott 107 comes in and asks this big question. What is the reason for big biceps? Why would we need big biceps? And if we've look over on the YouTube chat right here, strong biceps. This is from Adam, an absolute monster power lifter. And we just had the poll come in. We had over 60 people vote in the poll. Does bicep size matter for athletes? 42% said yes. 57% said no. So out of everyone voting, almost 60% of you guys think that you don't need to have big biceps. So I think one thing that we got to remember is that last week when we discussed does size matter, right? When we were talking about that, and we brought up the study, the research paper from this year, 23, that actually sort of basically proves that size does indeed matter, meaning that if you have a bigger muscle, you will be able to produce more force. And so if we're thinking about an athlete and if they, what they're going to need their bicep for, they need to have a strong bicep relative to their individual sport. So size does indeed matter if we want to have a strong bicep. So the big question then for individuals would be, Keith put in here in the chat is, what is the point of being a top athlete if you can't get any bros? Because your biceps are small. So of course you need huge biceps. Okay. So anyway, what in my mind is like, okay, what sports will bicep strength or bicep size play a major role? And you start to look at a sport like shot put, right? So you're here and you fully extend that elbow and it's a rapid extension. So if that's a rapid extension, okay, you're going to lengthen the bicep and your bicep's going to play a pretty big role in protecting that joint, okay, on the deceleration aspect. If you get into a sport like weightlifting, if we're overhead, right, we're going boom, we catch overhead in this position, the bicep, especially in overhead position, can play a role in stabilizing your shoulder, okay? If we're a wrestler and we're heavy on somebody's head here, we're doing this, we're getting heavy on someone's head, or if we're hitting somebody with like a front headlock here, that's going to be related to our bicep strength, okay, here, and our lat strength, okay? And then that's another factor. Okay, we're thinking about hitting a single leg shot and bringing in that knee, or like a knee pick. If we hit that knee pick here, right, we're bringing that in with elbow flexion. So the action of elbow flexion, okay, the action here of elbow flexion, I'm going to flex my biceps. The action of elbow flexion, okay, is what the bicep is responsible for. But also here, if I'm rotating my forearm, so if I'm grabbing somebody and rotating my bicep, my brachialis, that's going to play a very substantial role. Also, if I'm doing a pull-up, okay, so if I'm doing a pull-up here, I'm going to lengthen my lats through here, but I'm also going to bring my chin through at the top. The bicep plays a big role. So you've got to look at sports that have very fast elbow flexion or elbow extension, very fast sports that have elbow extension rapidly. So think about an offensive lineman. Think about a boxer. Think about a shot putter, okay? Discus, that's another sport, right? And a sport that has elbow flexion, wrestling, combat sports, it's going to play a role. Now, the argument would then be there's a point of diminishing returns if you're in a sport that's more endurance-based where we don't want to go super, super, like, massive biceps has to be our focus. Like, we need to play that we need to look at the decision and basically decide, okay, how much time should we really be spending on this, or should it be more focused on power output, doing explosive bicep exercises? We got some bicep exercises that we've shown you guys in the past, like slam curls, drop curls, stuff like that. So that's like another issue, is that you don't want to do so much bicep work that it impedes on your overarching training of that specific sport. But then now we start to think about, like, let's say a CrossFitter is using, let's say they have a test like a rope climb. If they're doing a rope climb, they have to be squeezing that rope. They have to be applying a massive amount of force on that rope, right? But then they're also pulling here. So they have to pull through that entire position. They have to accelerate through that full range of motion. Rope climbs require really strong biceps. Okay, so we have to just be aware that we're going to be using this in various situations, and then we have to train it accordingly. Now, if I'm looking at it, especially if I'm looking at it for like football, right, or for offensive and defensive linemen specifically in football, they might be using their biceps when they're pushing and pulling somebody, similar to wrestling. For a running back, they need strong biceps or strong grip for when to prevent fumbles. Now, if you're looking at a wide receiver, they need strong grip for when they catch the ball. So that will play a factor. Does this mean that we should be training it like all of the time? And I think if we're looking at athletes, an athlete that doesn't use their bicep would be a triple jumper, right? Like a triple jumper doesn't really need to train their biceps. Okay. A diver doesn't really need to be training their biceps. Okay. To a point, a tennis player or even a golfer will see some benefit based off of elbow health. And so you've got to look at it like, is this going to be something that we can do for stability, sort of like that? I've been talking about it as like structural bodybuilding. Is this something that we need to do to improve overall performance? Like it's directly correlated, thinking about the wrestler or thinking about the offensive lineman. Or is this something where they don't use it at all? And so you can go through that cycle and then basically say like, all right, if it's structural, maybe it's once a week, maybe twice a week. You can do some higher rep stuff with bodybuilding with your biceps, but really you could target the biceps well more so by doing pull-ups and things along those lines. Now, if you're using, and that's, you will see bicep size increase by doing pull-ups, by doing rope climbs, by doing compound movements. That's really the way that you've got to look at it. What's the best transfer training? And then if you have like any specific issue to the bicep, that's when you can start to factor in, okay, let's use some isolation here. Let's try to target the biceps a little bit more, and that might help us strengthen that even further. So I did want to answer that. I thought that was important. Do you actually need bigger biceps? It's a fun discussion. It's also one of those discussions that with younger athletes, I think that we as coaches tend to overlook. It's a way to get easy buy-in from the athlete. Does marathon runners, do they need bicep size? Like, no, they don't really need bicep size. They don't really need it at all. So we don't need to spend that time. But if we've got a wrestler or a football player or even a baseball player to a point, it's like, hey, if we can do some bicep work, they get a bigger pump. They feel better when they're training. And now all of a sudden they want to come in and train more because they like doing biceps. And then we backdoor them with more leg-based training. We backdoor them with plyometric work. We backdoor them with some impulse-based training. So I think you've got to look at it from a multi-angle means of training the athlete. So I wanted to answer that. I'm going to get into some questions inside the YouTube chat. And then I wanted to just point out too, if you're on YouTube or even if you're on Instagram, before we continue the Q&A, if you're interested for real deep dive discussions around topics. So we're doing topics today like bodybuilding or bicep size and how much bicep size do you need. What we do inside of our channel member live, which is our private live, and you can click on joining that on YouTube by just hitting the I think it's a $sign button. We will actually go even further into this and answer your specific questions. So we're only going to have anywhere between like 10 to 15 people in that private live chat. I can answer all of your training questions very specifically to your scenario. And that's going to be if you become a channel member. We meet every Friday where I give you direct tips on improving your training. It's a good group of people. Everybody's motivated. Everybody wants to become better athletes and better coaches. So click the join button for $10 a month. Click that join button if you're on the desktop, or click the link in the description if you're on your mobile to become a channel member. if you don't want to spend that $10, you can also check out our Garage Strength podcast over on its own channel on YouTube, any podcast app, also by also clicking on the link in the bio. So we do have the podcast, and then we've got that channel member live that we do privately, which is pretty cool. It's $10 a month, cheaper than a price of a cup of coffee for very specific lectures. And what we're trying to do is answer these questions where it's like, Keith just comes in and says, shorts, sweatpants, or tights for training. And I would say, listen, what kind of training are you doing? Are you doing training where you're going running? Are you doing training where you're going to be doing jumping? Are you doing training where you're doing more upper body work? Dude, sweatpants. Come on, sweatpants with the anklet tucked into your socks. Always sweatpants, and always sweatshirt tucked into your sweatpants. So you've got to have the sweatshirt tucked into your sweatpants, and then your sweatpants tucked into your socks. If you want to look like a savage and you want to play the part, okay, to become a freak, and you're training 4 days a week, every single week for 4 years, you better be wearing a sweatpants. You better be wearing a sweatshirt tucked into sweatpants, tucked into your socks. Keist. Better be doing that. Having big biceps looks great. Absolutely, I agree with that. I've been feeling a little self-conscious. I've been getting ripped up on the on our biceps video for having small arms, and on Peak Strength we showed the Simon's curl. Dude, my ego has just been slaughtered for having smaller biceps than I used to. I'm blaming running for that. I've been running. Tomorrow I'm trying to get 20 miles in tomorrow. So I'm going to be running for about 3.5 hours, I think, tomorrow morning. R2 is asking, should I put more weight on impulse day than lower body power day? No, you should not put more impulse. Impulse day should be a little bit lighter. And I was going to bring this up to our YouTube manager, Jason. I wanted to talk to Jason about this. I want to try and get Lance Brooks. He's a researcher at, I believe, SMU, and he talks quite a bit about impulse in sprinting. And Jason, I think we should try and get him on the podcast because he's like the first big time researcher that really, I think, really has talked a lot about that. Harry, I have sciatica, tried every stretch, fixed every recommended imbalance. If I train hard, I can't sleep, then I'll work in the morning. I can't sleep, then work in the morning. Almost a year now, it's really pissing me off. I just want to frickin' train. So Harry, I would say, have you gone to see somebody specifically? Have you been tested on it? Have they tried anything to improve that aspect? It could also be like piriformis syndrome. That's another issue that quite a bit of people struggle with. So let me know about that. Keith is coming back. I see Earl put up, you will do reviews, reactions of people's workouts and athletic skills and performances. Where should we upload those videos? So our big goal with the podcast now is that we're going to have a Freak of the Week section where you guys can submit your videos in Discord. So you submit a video in Discord, or you can DM me on Instagram at GhostfaceDMiller. You can DM us on Garage Strength's Instagram as well. And then in the podcast, we're going to have 1 or 2 lifts or 1 or 2 things that happens that we're going to call like Freak of the Week to analyze that. And then we also sort of want to have 1 or 2 like, what were you doing? But we haven't come up with a good title for that. So enter that in Discord or on Instagram. Eris, what's a good sword fighting program? I would say inside Peak Strength, if you go into Peak Strength, you can click on the lacrosse program. The lacrosse program is probably going to be the best sword fighting program. I think I answered that. Yeah, and I mean like giant sword, like guts. Like I agree with you. Like I know because I didn't realize that sword fighting was legit and that like you guys do this as a sport. I would recommend that, or wrestling. I think the wrestling program would be great. Fried Rice Boy, can you lose weight and still put on muscles? I want to be less fat, but not if I get weaker. So the big thing around that is like play the long game. Play like a 6-month game of I want to lose, let's say 12 to 15 pounds and slowly build muscle mass. And so you've got to make sure that you're dialed in with your caloric deficit. And what I would say is that in a month, right? Let's say there's 30 days in a month. You should try and be in a caloric deficit out of that probably 25 days a month. Okay, so literally 25 days a month. And then maybe 4 to 5 days out of the month, you get into a surplus or some type of neutral position. And that's going to help you get to that point of being able to build muscle and lose that fat now and lose that weight. Now, I also think a big factor too should be around how much protein are you consuming. So make sure that you're getting enough protein, because that's going to help handle that as well. While training, how long should I rest between sets? Training to build muscle, that is, or does that depend on the muscle? Okay, so that's Fred. Fred, what I would say is, and this is when we were designing this, one of the big aspects when we were designing peak strength was like, how can we optimize that the growth that we're trying to get, the adaptations that we're trying to get outside from the athlete. And so we have specific things built into peak strength, that one of them is the timer. And so the timer is going to be based off of building power, building muscle mass, or building muscle strength. Okay, so if we're looking at building just tons of strength, you're going to have a longer rest period. If you're building explosiveness, a moderate to longer rest period. If you're trying to build big time size, a little bit shorter rest period. And that's stuff that we have built directly into peak strength. So Fred, I would recommend testing that out, because you're going to use that timer then to get that feedback. But it's also one of the cool aspects around peak strength is that the timer really just helps you stay a little bit more focused and a little bit more dialed in with your overall training. I was just shutting off my phone's Instagram live because my phone's about to die. So thanks everybody for joining in on my personal Instagram. Now we're still on Garage Strength and we're on Garage Strength YouTube. I can easy bar curl 100 pounds for 5 reps. 5 sets of 5 reps, the heaviest easy bar in the gym. I'm 200 pounds at 25% body fat. Is there any diminishing returns if I would move the barbell curls? Your bicep strength is pretty fantastic. I would say Rambler, I think if you got maybe a little bit leaner, you would have huge biceps. And what if you also try to say like 5 sets of 12 or 5 sets of 17, because you're going to get a crazy pump in the bicep as well. Let me know what you think about that. How often should a weightlifter compete, in my opinion? This is a great question. I think this comes back to, what's their age? And, you look at younger weightlifters and it's like, dude, they can compete like every 2 to 3 months, like probably every 2 months. It gets to be overbearing. It gets to be almost, a weightlifting comp is so long. It can be quite an experience for the parents to do that. But I do genuinely think that there's a point to competing 4 to 5 meets out of the year when you're on the come up. I think then you're going to get to the point where it's like, all right, I want to have 1 or 2 big meets like a year. So I want to have, let's say if you're in the United States, Nationals and the American Open, right? Or Nationals and the Arnold, and you can use one of those 2. And then you can have the third one, either the Arnold or the American Open, as like a goal. And then you have a fourth one that's sort of like that at home, lower level meet, local meet. But there's a point where you're like, all right, I'm going to train in like I'm going to compete in like 4 to 8 local meets. And then you get to the point where like, all right, I made it to the AO or I made it to Arnold. Well, now I'm going to just do maybe 3 to 4 local meets. And then once you make it to Nationals, I think you got to go down to like 1 or 2 local meets. I think the one thing that a lot of elite level lifters forget is that local meets can help just for fun, right? Isn't it okay to use EMOM and to rotate between hand squat snatch? I don't know what hand squat snatch is. I'm going back on YouTube. It's easier to read the chat on YouTube. Now, let's go back up here. I think that depends on the sports you play. Rory, if you have an athlete with knee problems, how do you approach leg training to not cause injury and improve injury prevention in this area? Sled work is king for knee issues. I also think a lot of pulls, a lot of sled, a lot of pulls, a lot of reverse hyper. Sled, pull, reverse hyper, glute ham. Sled, pull, reverse hyper, glute ham. That's going to help a ton. Keith, what are your thoughts on that new thing that we're adding into the podcast? How often should you do mobility work? Every day, twice a day, a few times in a week? And one of the things inside Peak Strength is that we've got mobility work that you should be doing after every session. Okay, I think ideally you could do it after every session and in the mornings. I think twice a day would be ideal, 5 to 6 days a week. What should be the focus on accessories during the ascension phase, specifically for the upper body? It depends on the sport, Fried Rice Boy. Like if I'm, your accessories, as you're starting to peak in ascension and into the summit phase, like those aspects, those accessories need to be more dialed into your sports performance. Okay, so what's going to help with your sports performance? So for instance, if we have somebody who's a shot putter, they're going to be benching more, right? So the accessories that we might use are either going to be one, to support the bench press, so like an external rotation or like back work, or two, to prime and increase the bench press. So like explosive push-ups or direct tricep work, direct tricep heavy work. Okay, so now you can see during the ascension phase or during the summit phase, those accessories, those hypertrophy movement patterns are either going to play a major supporting role or a major role in enhancing your overall performance. Okay, so that's sort of how we like to think about it. How do you program an injury rehab into the workout and peak strength, specifically for Achilles rehab? So if you have somebody who has an Achilles issue, right, I'd back off of jumps. I would use the exercise replacement for jumps. I would do like more PVC work, more walking, more tib curl, maybe like easy jump rope, very, very light. I think the main focus there would be whatever hurts, stop doing it. Whatever is like uncomfortable, do it at a very low volume. And whatever helps it feel better the next day, do more of it, right? And so you have this little framework that you can just build off of. And that's where the exercise replacements come into being handy, and some of that rehab stuff for the mobility. Sir, gravity training plan actually make us really strong, like pull-ups, push-ups, dips, squats, and also these exercises in an explosive way, like all of those in an explosive way. For sure, Alka, that's a lot of the stuff that we're doing that we showed you guys, especially in that plyos video, and the video that just went out yesterday. I hope you guys liked that video. I thought that video was pretty legit. I liked doing it. It was some of those exercises, some of those series are very challenging. It was hard for me to film all of them. But yeah, I hope you guys liked that video from yesterday, and that's what that was about, Alka. Frederick W., any advice to select programming between swimming, doing now, and triathlon for marathon swimming? Honestly, if I had to say something, Frederick, I would focus more on just swimming specific and peak strength versus, training for a triathlon. A lot of people, that's typically their biggest weakness in the triathlon is going to be the swimming aspect. So, typically what I would recommend is keep hammering that, and you're still going to get the leg strengthening aspect that you can use. So I think that would be my recommendation. We just got a question about wrist strength for collegiate throwers. So a lot of people have been asking about. You should be hand cleaning there. Hand cleaning should not be an accessory. What program are you on, Fried Rice Boy? Hand cleaning should not be an accessory. So that would be like what, 3A or 4A? That should not be an accessory. I wanted to go into that wrist strength because a lot of people have asked us, like, if we're a weightlifter, if we're a thrower, dealing with wrist issues, and a lot of that does ironically go back to what you're going to be doing for bicep work. Are you doing reverse curls? Are you doing forearm works that's specific? Are you doing any slow eccentric work? Are you icing it? Because also the wrist does respond very well to just actually icing it. And then some massage as well. Some like Graston and what is the Chinese version is Guangsha, I think is what they call it, if I remember correctly. There's actually a lot of research. It's funny if you go on PubMed and you type in Gua Sha, I think that's what you'll see a lot of action out of in PubMed on scraping. Why is the app cost more in euros than in dollars? I don't know. I don't know that answer. We would have to figure that out. Ryan's in the chat. How you doing, Ryan? You ready for today's lifting? Okay, so Darius is coming in with a great question. This question I love, okay? What's the difference between training like an athlete, training like a bodybuilder? And I think that first off, that question distinguishes that a bodybuilder is not an athlete. So we've got to just actually look at bodybuilding is a sport, okay? It's a very specific sport, and we need to recognize that they are athletes, okay? So if we're going to train as an athlete, I would rephrase this and say, how do I train for performance, for speed, explosiveness, power output? Think about an open skilled sport where you're on a court, you're on a field, anything can happen, versus a sport as simple as bodybuilding. Not that bodybuilding's simple, but as far as like the judgment and what needs to happen. Some of the big factors that I see in bodybuilding, you have to be super dialed in with your nutrition, like 100% dialed in. If you're not, you're done. Okay. The thing that stinks in sports performance is that people don't see that. They don't see and recognize and appreciate that until it's either too late or until they're at the elite level. If you can buy in the way that a bodybuilder buys in with their nutrition early on, that immediately is going to give you a huge bump. If you start to eat well, you start to sleep well, you start to do more mobility. That's another factor with bodybuilding. Bodybuilders have to have these big, long muscles. They're extremely mobile individuals. Okay, so that's another big aspect, is that typically, based off of my experience, bodybuilders spend more time doing mobility work because they need to increase the length of the muscle belly. They need to increase that size, and they are 100% committed to that. Sports performance needs to grow in that realm. We've done a fantastic job with bodybuilding, with mobility work, but they need more mobility work relative, I think, to the bodybuilder, actually, because they're doing so many crazy movements and there's so much force that they have to gua sha. They have to do so much work as an athlete through different angles, different speeds, different strength, taking on blunt trauma, things like that. So as far as the difference, I think the big factor is that it's slightly easier to diagnose like a very precise muscle deficiency for a bodybuilder. Okay, so if we look at shoulders aren't as developed, let's target them for the next 6 to 8 weeks. See what happens. Whereas in performance, you've got to have shoulder strength, but you also have to have power output, and you also have to be super explosive. So the way I see the big difference between somebody who's, let's say, a football player versus a bodybuilder would just be there's going to be a larger breadth of exercises to choose from, and periodization has to be really, really dialed in on the performance. And on the bodybuilding side, that aspect's going to be slightly easier. Okay, so it's going to be slightly easier to do the actual training planning. Now, here's the big one. Bodybuilders are some of they're like I would call them the distance runners of the performance world. Okay, so if you took a bodybuilder and you went and worked out with a bodybuilder, okay, and you're an athlete, you're a football player, okay, and you go train with a bodybuilder, you will be enlightened by how much discomfort these dudes can deal with. And when I compare it to distance runners, distance running is extremely uncomfortable. You get guys running 800s, 1500s, 5Ks, even going in and then running a marathon, something like that. They deal with mental stress. It's like they feed off of it, and bodybuilders are no different. It's just a different type of stress. So that's another big aspect. But I think the big thing is like, in performance, it's going to be the same way, where it's like, all right, let's look at the top 3 things that an athlete needs to improve, and we got to build the program around that. Bodybuilding, let's look at the top 3 areas of their body that they need to improve, and let's build that out. And then backdoor that with mobility, backdoor that with really dialed in recovery and really dialed in nutrition. So that's going to be like the difference. Aaron just asked, when is Haley's next competition? We're going to Qatar, November 30th. November 30th, I leave for Qatar. Yeah, bodybuilders are constantly, like if you look at a bodybuilder too, they're doing like super, super long stretches with weights, pausing, slower eccentrics, just some crazy work, crazy work. I'm trying to put together my own right now based on what I've learned from your videos. I'm going to get the app when I get some money. That's from Fried Rice Boy. I appreciate that. Anyway, dinner now for Keith. He's heading out. See you, Keith. The freak of the week sounds good. Just need to actually do something freakish in a good way. And not in an, oh God, no, what are you doing way. If you do something in an, oh God, what are you doing? If you do something crazy, we have a video of Yvonne blacking out and just collapsing. we do want to have those videos too, because they're sometimes entertaining. Exercise for running faster from Helena. Exercise for running faster, I would say, single leg squats and Nordics. Single legs and Nordics. Veg or non-veg, which is good food for test? Okay, from Protham. I don't, dude, I think you're eating vegetables. You got to be like cooking broccoli, cooking cabbage. All those things are going to help. Also, you're looking at like sweet potatoes and stuff. Joey Hodge, do you have any tips to prepare the mind body on game day? I think that preparing the mind is so important on game day. The body aspect is like, okay, what do you do the night before? What time are you going to bed? The mind stuff would be like, I'm going to try and visualize before I'm going to bed. Okay. I'm going to try and visualize in the morning. And then the next aspect is in the morning. What are those 3 to 4 key things that you have to remember? Okay. Write those down. Those are 3 to 4 key goals that you need to have. Okay. If we're talking about football, when they line up in this offensive scheme, this is exactly what I need to do on defense. Okay. When they do this in motion, this is what I need to do. And you play that out and you just review that. And you're going to have a much more sounder mind by running through those scenarios over and over again. But often what people forget is like, they just don't do that because they're so stressed. So it's like, write down 2 or 3 major goals that you want to do in the game and review it every hour on the hour for 2 to 3 minutes and just review it. And that can go a very long way. For the body, it's like, can you stretch a lot the night before? Can you stretch the morning of? Can you make sure that you're eating enough carbohydrates? Can you make sure you're getting good protein? Can you don't eat something that's weird and going to upset your stomach, right? Byron Mock, would building biceps and forearm muscles help prevent Tommy John for pitchers? So I do believe, I'm not so certain of the biceps preventing Tommy John, but I do think there's a point with the forearm strength and forearm capability directly with Tommy John. I don't 100% know the answer to that, but I think it would be of value for sure. I very much so believe that. Advice for athletes that still want to train and compete at high level in CrossFit, powerlifting, weightlifting with already advanced arthritis developed in the knee from sports early on. I would try and figure out, if you want to do that, can you get PRP? Can you get surgery? Can you get it scraped? Can you get, some people will go overseas and they'll get some injections to help grow or to help heal those specific joints that might be causing you to be arthritic. I would also say, so Matt's saying he had ACL reconstruction and removed the meniscus, but still wants to train clean and jerk and snatch heavy with arthritis in the knee. I'd say, can you minimize squatting then? Like you just squat once a week and the rest of the time you're doing pulls. Are there lifts that really transfer well over to your specific lifting style? And I think, like one of the things that we do in Peak Strength is that we lay this out and it's like, okay, base off of if we have snatch or clean and jerk or back squat or front squat, when you get the intake for weightlifting, we're going to look at it and say like, okay, your pull specific program or your squat specific program. And if you have injuries too, you're also informing our programming based off of that. So it's like, we want to look at it and say, if you can power snatch heavy and it doesn't hurt your knee, you should be doing more of that, right? If you do even something like no feet clean and jerks, or no feet, even looking at like a power jerk might have a little bit less stress on your knee than a split jerk. So it's like trying to figure that out, Matt, but also figure out on the front end, can you get it scraped or can you get it in a PRP injection? But then on the back end also, like if you're doing more reverse hyper, you're doing more sled work, does that help you alleviate that stress while building up your strength? Anything like that. That would help. BK Fitness 4, I would say Garage Strength Program Design would be the first one that you should get. Then the Sports Performance Bible, those two together sort of go in depth. And this year we are working right now, deep work. We're in deep work on our football books. We got a big football book coming out in 24 that we're really, really hammering right now. So stay tuned for that. Now, what weightlifting shoes does Garage Strength like? So Aaron, I would say that I typically don't really like a super high heel. So Haley, I think, has the Romaleo 3s or 2s. And I actually like one of their cheaper versions because it's like a little bit lower heel height. So I would say, like, if you could get a heel height that's like, what is it, 5/8? I actually think that's better. Like, some people have these like 7/8 heel heights super high, and I think a lot of stuff gets pushed forward. I think the Romaleos that Haley has are, maybe hers are 5/8, and then there's another one. There's another Nike shoe that is actually cheaper, and it's like Savaleo or something. It's like a different version of Romaleo. It's like Savaleo. I forget the actual name, but I actually think their heel height is better. Let me look that up real quick because I want to answer that. Nike heel height, Savaleo. Yeah, Savaleo's is the other one, and that's the one that I honestly think is probably a better one. If I'm trying to find, where's that heel height on this? 15 millimeters. So 15 millimeters to inches, because I should be operating that way, but I'm not smart enough. So that's going to be about 0.6 of an inch. Yeah. So that's the one I like the most, to be honest with you. I hope that helps, because I think oftentimes we just get pushed forward with super high heel heights, and I don't think that it's overly effective. Burhan. Okay, Pratham and Burhan. Do compound exercises, are they good for boxing, and which side are you in, the Gypsy King or the Predator? Predator. Do you have advice for wrestlers who aren't explosive by nature but want to be successful? Should one focus on a style that is less athletic or focus on building athleticism? I would focus on building athleticism. I think boxing would benefit from compound exercises because it can help your global recruitment and force greater power output. If you're doing things like even just like a back squat or a bench press or a pull up, that compound movement's going to pay off for a boxer, and same thing for a wrestler. And I would say, if you're not super explosive, you need to be training. You should be improving your back squat, improving your jumps and things along those lines. And at the same time, I think it does make sense to have a style that's maybe a little bit less aggressive offensively and just cater to having a strong defense and a reattack. You know, I think that's another big aspect, is that a reattack is going to help you quite a bit. So if you have a good defense, and when someone shoots a specific way or someone's moving you a specific way for their offensive attack, what's your counter? And really that should be how you build your strategy, in my opinion. Okay, so I hope that helps. Do you have any advice for any weightlifters who have a bad habit of jumping back? Matthew Castellano. So the best way, if we've got a weightlifter who jumps back, there's a couple weird ways to do this. I was the king of jump backs. Okay, so the first time I snatched 300, you can watch the video, I jumped back like 15 feet. One, you're typically going to have longer legs. Two, your hamstrings are going to be a lot stronger. So the first step, get stronger quads. Second step, do no feet snatches. Third step, do no feet low hang snatches. Do a lot of muscle snatches that are flat footed. And then finally, if it's not working, actually think about jumping forward and you'll probably stay in place. I know it's a weird thought, but it literally helps. It's a weird cue, but I would go in that sequence, that order. Is a six-pack most important muscle for running and jumping? I don't think so. I don't think any muscles are more important than another. I think when we start to think about one muscle being more important, sure, there's muscle groups that are going to be more important than other areas, dependent upon the movement pattern. But I think that we become too absolutist if we're like, oh, we just need to dial in this specific muscle or this muscle area. It has to be the best, right? And I think all of these things matter. Okay, but if we are focused and using the six-pack abs, right? So if we're using the six-pack abs that you can see in the chat here on YouTube, is that now, well, if we know that when we front squat, there's a lot of action from our abs. We know when we do single leg squats, there's a lot of action from your gut. And so now you can train both aspects to improve your abs, your core, your trunk, and improve your legs. Okay, so keep that in mind. I lost my network for a while. Should I train my abs twice a week? Yeah, you can train abs twice a week at the end of your workouts. Coach, I heard weightlifters have 3 20-minute sessions a day. Is this true with your athletes? No. Our athletes do a session in the morning. So 9 sessions a week for Haley. And she does Monday, Wednesday, Friday. She has a morning session that's about 45 minutes. And then at night, it's about an hour and a half. Do you use instruments when you test your athletes? So the instruments that we use to test are going to be weights, but also vertical jump mat. We have a vertical jump mat, and we will measure certain other things. Adam chiming in. We all have a six-pack. Some of it's just hidden under some huskiness, and I agree with that. How to deal with losing conditioning. We got 5 minutes left on our sweet poll, by the way. So we got a sweet poll active right now on hypertrophy inside the YouTube chat. Make sure you guys vote on it. How do you deal with losing conditioning while being in a muscle gain phase? So this is from Emil, and I would assume this would mean I'm trying to get as big as possible, as strong as possible, but while doing so, I might be losing some endurance work, and maybe I'm a wrestler, a football player, something along those lines. I think the easiest thing that you can do is 3 days a week, 4 days a week, go in 30 minutes to the sauna. That's going to help maintain some of that endurance aspect. Something else that you can do, 2 to 3 days a week, 25 to 30 minutes on the assault bike at like 45 to 55 RPMs. Nice and easy. Don't get your heart rate up over 125. You can do that, 125, and you can still get freaking huge. And what you'll actually see is that if you're holding that 30 minutes at 125 to 130 heart rate, dude, you're going to actually recover faster, and you're still going to get freaking jacked. So I would just recommend maintaining that aspect right there. Okay, so let me know if that helps. Somebody just asked, how do I train an explosive power athlete in track and field? And I would ask, is this specific to throwers or pole vaulters? Okay, we've got to look at the sport and the movement pattern. What kind of locomotion is it? What type of stuff are they doing with their technical sport? Is it rotational? How much maximum strength is going to pay off or not pay off? That's all going to play a role, but I need to know, if we're a power athlete, technically a high jumper is a power athlete, right? But I'm still going to train them a little bit differently than a shot putter. Okay, hey man, will you be watching the Rugby World Cup final? Maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. Dude, I feel like the World Cup for rugby goes on for like 6 weeks. Is that just me? It feels like it's really long. Are you still running every day for the marathon? Do you carb up the night before or 1 hour before the run? So I do eat a little bit before a run, only when I'm doing a very, very, very long run. The night before, I will eat a decent amount of carbs. I've been eating a lot more protein, and I'm running 5 days a week. So what I ended up doing is I lay out my week that Sunday I have a very easy run, like my Sunday run, and maybe I could do a strength training video for a marathon around this, what we're doing, how we're laying that out. But Sunday I do a super easy run, okay? Monday I do a run that's going to be about 7.5 to 8 miles. Tuesday I do another run that's going to be probably about 6 to 7 miles. Wednesday, I take off. Thursday, I do my second longest run on the week. I try to get close to 9 to 9.5 miles. I take off Friday again. And then Saturday is my longest run. So Saturday, I've done 18.7 last week. Tomorrow, I'm going to try and hit 20. We'll see how I feel an hour and a half in. I'm trying to hit 20, though, tomorrow. So that's how my week sort of has been flowing. I like running the day after that long run just because it's like a way for me to stay loose. What are your athletes' caffeine intake on average? 200 to 300 milligrams, I'd say, is simple. Harry Potter's in here. Sorry for being late. Should football players start with 12 weeks long-distance cardio? No, do not. I mean, football as in soccer or football, but either way, I would not recommend a lot of long-distance cardio. I would do long-distance cardio like once a week. That would be my recommendation. Will you add a way to customize the weight increases in peak strength instead of the standard 1 kilogram? Do you mean customize for you? So we'll recommend that you can add the weight, but you can also add in weights as well. I'm confused by that question a little bit, DVH. Clarify that for me if you can. I play collegiate rugby and I use peak strength. After games, my neck feels very sore. Should I add some neck strengthening? Yeah, so you could add in some high pulls. You could add in some neck rolls. That will help. The snatches should help quite a bit as well. What's the best exercise for 100 meters or long jump? 100 meters or long jump? Come on, you guys know what I'm going to go with. Single leg squats, long jump on that plant. Remember, think about your body is the trebuchet, and that plant leg is where you're going to be holding here, planting, and then your body comes through and jumps, right? So if we can decelerate rapidly, that's going to help that. That would be brilliant to do a strength training video for. Yeah, I can try and do that. I think we actually have a strength training for marathon, but I can do one on like how we set up the week and how I approach that. Maybe we'll call that like a husky guy marathon training or something. That would probably be something we would do over on Peak Strength. Daily discipline to get a higher power clean in 2 months. If for 2 months, okay, I would recommend that if you want to increase your power clean, you should literally clean for 4 to 5 days a week. And this is something we've been coming up with, this thought process of 4 for 4. 4 days a week for a week. 4 days a week, okay, or 4 hours a week for a week. And then we go 4 days of training a week for a month. And then you do that for 4 days a week for 4 months. Then you do that 4 days a week for 4 seasons. Then you do that for 4 days a week for a year, or for 4 years. And it's our 4 for 4 process. 4 for 4. So if you're somebody who wants to increase your power clean, try to power clean like 4 days a week, but just 2 or 3 of those days can be just getting in reps and technique work. And then one of those, you try and push it a little bit. It's interesting from Burhan. He just commented, do you think Olympic lifting is necessary for building athleticism? So he doesn't have a lot of weightlifting coaches. So I want to answer this in 2 manners because I also think that's important. I want to answer this other question here. Yesterday I did a whole bunch of research on this because somebody made a comment. Now, Coach, do you look at the resting heart rate when your Apple Watch first thing waking up? My resting heart rate has dropped drastically, like drastically. I can pull up the data, but it's been like below 52, whereas below or in the past it'd be well above 60. Okay. Isolating muscles is not bad for athletes. It is not bad. It is productive. Going back to, do you ever program conditioning with weights for any of your athletes like imams? For sure. On the minutes, we use quite a bit. We have a whole video on wrestling coming out. We've got some other videos that we've talked about that. We've got a video that we just filmed last week on endurance-based training for athletes. That's going to be coming out, and you'll see that. I wanted to go into Burhan's. So we have 50 votes. How often should athletes do hypertrophy training? Twice a week, once a week, once in a while. So basically once to twice a week. I think that's fair. Now, we had a comment on our YouTube video, and I wanted to share because somebody had commented, like, there's no research that weightlifting exercises can improve athletic performance. And I thought to myself, okay, let's start off with what determines athletic performance in the lab. Okay, a vertical jump, sprint, change of direction. I think those are things that are fairly equated to athleticism, right? Like people see someone jump high, they're athletic. See somebody run fast, they're probably athletic. See somebody change their direction rapidly, they're probably athletic. So I decided I wanted to go and just look up all of the weightlifting research and potentially do a video. And so these are the, and this was in about 10 minutes. These are all of the studies that I found around weightlifting just in about 10 minutes on PubMed, having a positive impact on various sports from basketball to football to, just general testing. With that being said to Burhan, because Burhan mentions that he doesn't have access to weightlifting, one of the benefits in Peak Strength is that if you say you can't weightlift, you can build a program. And there is some research that there's some evidence that doing weighted jumps will suffice to a point, okay, to a point. So trap bar jumps, dumbbell jumps, those things will pay off as long as you're still squatting along those lines. I believe weightlifting is probably the best. Weightlifting variations for athletes are probably the best way. But if I have an athlete who comes in and they're 25 years old and they've never snatched or clean, but they're still a world-class athlete, I'm probably not going to introduce weightlifting. But with that being said, we want to do a whole video breaking down all of the research that actually does show that weightlifting and weightlifting variations can improve overall sports performance. So let me know if you guys want to hear that. Make sure you guys comment in the YouTube chat if you want to hear that. or see that get done. So DVH came back. My gym doesn't have half kilo plates. The smallest are 1.25. So if peak strength recommends 54, I cannot put that on the bar. Okay. I got you, DVH. I wonder if being in pounds would be more effective there. That's tough because I'm wondering if pounds would be better. They don't even have 1K plates. That stinks. But yeah, we can figure something out. And I think in the time being, it's like I would err on the one higher side as well. I would just go like a half kilo above where you were. Yeah, let me know if that helps. What's up, Steve? I'm actually about to get off here. I've got to do an NSCA presentation. So I'm going to be live on NSCA's. They're doing a big coaches summit online this weekend, and my presentation is actually, I believe it's actually being presented right now because I filmed it on site, but then I have to get into the NSCA live where I'm going to be answering questions from people who were involved with that. So I do think having forearms that are stronger will help boxers. So I've got to get out of here so I can get into that chat, but I'm so glad you guys tuned in. Don't forget, if you want to join the private lives and become a channel member, you can click on join on your desktop, or you can click on the link in the description if you're on mobile. Until next time, comment down below in the chat for what you guys want to see, what topics you want to have us do, what topics you want to have us focus on. Until next time, peace.